In May 1940, the world watched in horror as Nazi forces swept across Europe. The fall of France loomed large, and news from Dunkirk was dire. In London, fear gripped hearts as chaos reigned. But amidst this turmoil, Winston Churchill emerged, a fierce voice in a sea of doubt. Few believed in him, yet his resolve would ignite a spark of hope. In a remarkable span of just 9 months, Europe witnessed the astonishing effectiveness of Hitler's blitzkrieg, an aggressive military strategy that would change the tide of the continent forever. Picture it. The year is 1939, and the world is still trying to recover from the painful scars of the First World War. Yet, in a matter of months, this fragile peace would be obliterated by a series of rapid offensives. First, there was Poland. Nazi Germany unleashed its fury on this nation in September 1939, deploying their advanced tanks in waves. A mere 35 days later, Poland was under occupation, swiftly becoming a harbinger of terror. As the dust settled, one could hear the rising fear rippling throughout Europe. Were any nation safe? Next came Scandinavia. Denmark fell within hours, a stark reminder of how unprepared nations were against Hitler's advanced tactics. In Norway, the situation was more extensive, yet German troops were relentless. Here, the Luftwaffe roared through the skies, their bombers raining down destruction. Not a soul was left untouched, as images of cities crumbling were broadcasted, igniting an undercurrent of panic across Europe. As spring approached, the focus shifted to Western Europe. In May 1940, Belgium and the Netherlands became the next pawns on Hitler's chessboard, falling like dominoes. The strategies were ingenious. German forces advanced quickly, encircling and isolating their opponents with a fluidity that stunned military experts. Even as Allied forces struggled to mount a defense, German tanks pierced through what were thought to be unassailable lines. A sense of disbelief enveloped the world as each country fell. With eyes glued to radio broadcasts and newspaper headlines, families began to worry. Was Britain next? Here was a small island, often viewed as an impenetrable fortress, but now standing alone against a war machine that had yet to meet a challenger. Tension filled the air as whispers echoed through the British War Cabinet. Some began to consider negotiation over resistance. The chilling anticipation of a proposed surrender hung heavily, especially as the German High Command confidently predicted that the British would capitulate by summer. Can you imagine the dread that filled the hearts of ordinary citizens as they watched uncertainty cloud their future? Would they remain defiant, or would they bow to the inexorable advance of tyranny? What they didn't know then was that a fight for survival was about to begin, a pivotal moment that would ignite the flame of resilience in the face of overwhelming odds. In the early days of May 1940, the political landscape of Britain lay in ruins. Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain, once a steadfast figure in the face of growing tensions across Europe, found himself at the centre of a catastrophic failure. His policy of appeasement, which had aimed to secure peace by making concessions to Adolf Hitler, had not just faltered, it had crumbled in the wake of disaster. The devastating Norwegian campaign, riddled with mismanagement and military blunders, had amplified public dissatisfaction and severely undermined his leadership. With Chamberlain's government on the brink of collapse, Britain stood at a crossroads, a nation grappling with uncertainty and fear. Many within Parliament believed that the best course forward lay with Lord Halifax, a seasoned diplomat who advocated for peace talks with the Nazi regime. To them, it seemed like a rational choice, an approach that might spare Britain from the horrors of a wider conflict. But the reality of wartime politics demanded something bolder, something strikingly different. When the time came for the king to make a decision, he sided with Winston Churchill. In a moment that would forever change the course of history, Churchill, a man whose past failures included the infamous Gallipoli campaign, was summoned to take the helm. Known for his fierce rhetoric and unyielding tenacity, Churchill invoked mixed emotions amongst his contemporaries. Many felt trepidation, not just from his failure, but from his reputation as a stubborn idealist who often clashed with conventional wisdom. Yet even in the shadow of skepticism, something ignited in the hearts of the people. Churchill's appointment was not met with widespread jubilation. Instead, there was a palpable anxiety hanging in the air as individuals weighed the notion of a leader who had been mocked for his doggedness, a man many distrusted. But this unease also bore the flames of hope, hope for a leader who might dare to stand defiantly against tyranny. As Churchill stepped into the chaotic fray of leadership at this unprecedented dark hour, he did not cower before the facts of the situation. He was acutely aware of the suffering unfolding across Europe, yet he also recognized that this was a moment pregnant with possibility. His determination would not only rally a nation, but spark a fire within their collective spirit, transforming fear into resilience. It was this audacity that would soon challenge complacency, urging Britain to embrace a fight that would define their very existence. And so, as the pages of history turned, the day came when Churchill stood before the House of Commons to address the nation. His fiery words would electrify the air, setting the stage for the fight that lay ahead. The world watched, and they would soon learn that the reluctance that had held Britain captive was about to give way to a fierce resolve that no amount of despair could extinguish. The fight for Britain's survival had begun. As Churchill stepped into his role as Prime Minister on May 10th, 1940, the weight of the moment crashed down upon him. It wasn't just a typical change in leadership, it was the dawn of a new era, one marked by the thunderous march of invading German forces. Within hours of his assumption, the news was grim. Hitler had unleashed a full-scale invasion of France, and Britain stood perilously unprepared. Churchill's heart must have raced as he quickly assessed the dire situation. The army, once a symbol of British strength, had been decimated during swift confrontations in the spring of that year. The soldiers who remained fought valiantly, but morale was low and leaders were gripped by despair. The war cabinet meetings were chaos personified, a cacophony of voices echoing fear and uncertainty. As proposals for peace negotiations with Hitler circulated, many ministers, some even advocating to seek the intervention of Mussolini, hesitated, visibly shaken by the threat looming over them. But Churchill was resolute. The idea of negotiating with Hitler, to him, was not just a desperate measure, it was an act of national suicide. In those dark days, he understood that surrender would not bring peace. It would only herald the end of Britain as they knew it. Among the swirling doubts and fears, he knew that standing firm was imperative. Yet behind those closed doors, the pressure mounted. Critics emerged, fierce and unyielding, challenging his every belief and question. They scrutinized his every move, debating the fate of a nation that seemed to teeter on the edge of oblivion. In those moments, when every decision could mean the difference between freedom or oppression, Churchill found his voice. He chose to speak. With fierce determination and a clarity that captured the essence of the battle ahead, he began to articulate his vision for Britain's defiance. Those first words, born from the depths of adversity, were not simply an invitation to fight, but a rallying cry that would resonate through the hearts of his countrymen. In an age where despair might have crushed spirits, Churchill's resolve became the very essence of hope against tyranny, igniting a flame within the nation that could not be extinguished. On May 13th, 1940, Winston Churchill stood before the House of Commons, a momentous occasion that would resonate throughout history. As he took a deep breath and surveyed the faces of anxious parliamentarians, he understood what was expected of him. A reassuring message, a glimmer of hope amid the chaos. But instead, he chose to lay bare the harsh realities ahead. "I have nothing to offer but blood, toil, tears, and sweat," he declared, a phrase that struck like lightning, gripping everyone in the room. His words echoed with raw honesty, no sugarcoating, no false promises. Churchill didn't promise peace, he promised a fight for a nation reeling from the threat of Nazi Germany, that was precisely what they needed to hear. He pledged that Britain would be relentless. "We shall fight on the beaches, we shall fight on the landing grounds, we shall fight in the fields and in the streets, we shall fight in the hills, we shall never surrender." Each time he spoke, it was not just about the troops or the strategic locations, it was about the heart of Britain, the indomitable spirit of a nation willing to stand firm against tyranny. As he finished, the air crackled with a mix of fear and exhilaration. Stunned silence turned into applause, with members of Parliament rising to their feet, rallying not just to a leader, but to a shared cause. Churchill's words became a clarion call, igniting a flame of resolve across the country. In that moment, he transformed despair into defiance, ensuring that the fight for freedom was not just his, but theirs too. From that day forward, his speech became the backbone of British resistance, a testament to courage in the face of overwhelming odds. The news from across the English Channel was not what Berlin had anticipated. Instead of reports detailing a nation in disarray, broken under the pressures of war, the German High Command was met with something far more alarming: a Britain ablaze with determination. Intercepted radio communications told a different story. A chorus of resilience and defiance echoed throughout the airwaves. As the German leaders huddled in the halls of power, their initial confidence slowly began to crumble. Adolf Hitler, who had been certain that Britain would swiftly seek peace in the face of his military machine, seethed with fury. His strategic calculations hinged on the belief that an overwhelming show of force would break the spirit of the British people. But now, with reports of Churchill's stirring speeches galvanizing the population, it was evident that they were not crumbling, but rising to the challenge. Hitler's frustration boiled over when he learned that Churchill's rallying cry had united disparate factions of British society. The words seemed to resonate with a depth that transcended political allegiance, igniting a national spirit of defiance. German intelligence analysts noted that Churchill's declaration of total resistance had transformed the British mindset. No longer were they passive recipients of fate, they were prepared to fight back, and with ferocity. Recognizing the shift in dynamics, Hitler made a dramatic decision. He postponed the carefully laid plans for Operation Sea Lion, his envisioned invasion of Britain. The notion that this would be a quick victory had evaporated, replaced by a grim realization that the British would not yield easily. The German war machine, once poised for what seemed like a straightforward march to victory, now faced an unexpected and resilient enemy. Meanwhile, Joseph Goebbels, the Minister of Propaganda, and his team scrambled to regain control over the narrative. They began concocting strategies to counteract the growing momentum of Churchill's speeches and the emerging spirit of unity among the British. Leaflets were dropped, broadcasts buzzed with fervour, and the German public was inundated with messages of optimism and superiority, even as the euphoria of the Reich began to waver. Yet the damage had been done. Hitler's misjudgment had unveiled a critical truth. Britain would not go quietly into the night. The resolve of a nation ignited by words is a powerful force, one that can transform despair into determination. And now, as war continued to unfold, the German leadership would have to reckon with not only the might of British arms, but the unyielding strength of their spirit. The reality set in. Germany's path to conquest would not be simply paved with victory, but fraught with obstacles requiring a new approach, as the British continued to prove that they were far from finished. As the German forces advanced relentlessly, weeks later, they had the British Expeditionary Force cornered at Dunkirk. The weight of those desperate days hung heavy in the air, yet in the midst of this turmoil, a strange turn of fate unfolded. Adolf Hitler, often characterized by his swift decisiveness, hesitated. This hesitation proved crucial, granting Winston Churchill the precious time he needed to coordinate what would become one of the most extraordinary operations in military history. Operation Dynamo, as it was called, began amid chaos and despair. Picture it, Hundreds of thousands of soldiers huddled on the beaches of Dunkirk, exposed to constant attacks from the Luftwaffe, desperately trying to hold their ground. It was then that Churchill's stirring words echoed, "We shall fight on the beaches." Those words became more than just a speech, they transformed into a mantra. Suddenly, the evacuation was not simply an escape, but a powerful statement of resistance. In those harrowing days, as boats braved the dangerous waters, ordinary civilians took to the seas in their private vessels, a fleet of courage against the might of a determined enemy. These men and women, unarmed and untrained, displayed remarkable bravery, echoing Churchill's spirit, a testament to human will and tenacity. Over the course of 9 days, more than 330,000 soldiers were evacuated, turning what could have been a catastrophic defeat into a remarkable triumph of resolve. Meanwhile, Hitler brooded over this unexpected outcome, convinced that luck alone had shifted the tides in favor of the British. But for those who bore witness, it was evident that it wasn't merely fortune at play. Instead, it was the awakening of willpower that truly turned the table. Churchill had inspired a nation to defy the odds, forging a connection that spurred action even in the bleakest of circumstances. In the end, Dunkirk was more than a military retreat. It became a rallying cry for the British, embodying their spirit and determination. And as the sun set on those beaches, a new narrative was born, one of resilience, hope, and the unyielding will to fight against all odds. It was a miracle that not only proved Churchill right, but also solidified the idea that unity and resolve could triumph even when the situation seemed utterly dire. As the sirens wailed and the shadows of destruction loomed over Britain during the devastating Blitz, one man's voice cut through the chaos like a beacon of hope. Winston Churchill understood something that many failed to grasp. Wars are not won solely on the battlefield. They are first and foremost fought in the minds of the people. Imagine huddling in a cramped, dimly lit bomb shelter, surrounded by family and friends, the distant roar of aircraft overhead sending a chill down your spine. Each day brought the very real threat of devastation, yet there was something that held this nation together. The powerful rhetoric of Churchill as it resonated through radios in homes across the country. His speeches were more than mere words. They were lifelines. His defiance echoed in every corner, igniting a shared purpose among the British people, fostering unity in their darkest hour. Never, never, never give in became more than a motto. It was a rallying cry for a nation on the brink of despair. Churchill's ability to articulate the feelings of the populace instilled a belief that they were not alone in their suffering. His words painted a picture of resilience, transforming fear into courage, hopelessness into determination. While the bombs exploded outside, within those shelters, a spirit emerged, one that historians now cherish and call the Churchillian spirit. This spirit was not just about survival, it was about thriving in adversity, a manifestation of strength that surpassed any military might. Personal stories from this era reveal how Churchill's speeches provided solace to millions. Take Margaret, a mother whose home had been reduced to rubble. She would gather her children and tune in to the radio, drawing strength from Churchill's unwavering resolve. "If he can stand up and keep fighting," she would say, "then so can we." The emotional connection forged through his rhetoric transcended politics. It became a part of the everyday fabric of life, reminding everyone that their struggles were shared. In essence, Churchill's mastery of language turned words into weapons, tools that fortified the resolve of a beleaguered nation. The psychological battle fought through his speeches became as crucial as any military strategy. As the world witnessed devastation beyond comprehension, the true power of mindset emerged. United under Churchill's banner, the British people learned that resilience was their strongest armor, a revolutionary notion showing that sometimes the fiercest battle is fought not with swords or bombs, but with unwavering spirit and shared conviction. As the summer of 1940 unfolded, Hitler's ambitions began to unravel, revealing the cracks in his grand design. Operation Sea Lion, his long-anticipated invasion of Britain, was supposed to be the crowning achievement of his military prowess. Yet, the Luftwaffe's attempts to dominate the skies were falling woefully short. The relentless air raids, intended to crush British morale, instead sparked a fire of resilience across the nation, fueled in part by the stirring speeches of Prime Minister Winston Churchill. Each declaration of defiance sent shockwaves through Berlin, igniting a white-hot fury among Hitler and his senior leaders. Hitler, who had once dismissed Churchill as merely a drunken bulldog, found himself grappling with an unforeseen reality. The British spirit, far from being broken, was more united and defiant than ever. Every failed bombing raid revealed not just the strength of the Royal Air Force, but also the tenacity of ordinary citizens. They rallied together, turning up to work despite the chaos, tending to the wounded and maintaining the war effort against overwhelming odds. The fabric of everyday life in Britain became interwoven with stories of bravery and determination, a stark contrast to the panic and fear that Hitler had anticipated. This unexpected resilience made it abundantly clear. Hitler had fundamentally miscalculated the British resolve. What was meant to be a swift campaign became a futile endeavour, causing him to delay Operation Sea Lion indefinitely. His once grand vision of enforcing peace through intimidation crumbled. The man who had boasted about bent nations now found himself encountering a formidable opponent, one that would not capitulate out of fear, but rather rise up in defiance. As summer faded, so too did Hitler's dream of swiftly subjugating Britain. The frustrated dictator was left with an unfolding nightmare, a war that was becoming increasingly complex and drawn out. The shadows of doubt crept into his mind, but the facade of confidence he maintained would ultimately mask a significant turning point. From that moment, the campaign for Britain became nothing short of a fight for survival, and what had initially seemed like an imminent victory turned into a frustrated gamble with ever greater stakes. In the dim corners of the House of Commons, where despair loomed heavy, one voice pierced through the thick fog of uncertainty. Winston Churchill stood resolute, not merely delivering a speech, but igniting a spark that would illuminate a nation fighting for its very life. His words were more than just rhetoric. They were a lifeline, a call to arms that transformed collective fear into a fierce resolve. Imagine being part of that pivotal moment as the weight of history pressed down on Britain. Many had lost faith, facing the prospect of surrendering to tyranny. But Churchill, with unwavering certainty, painted a picture of defiance. He reminded the people that their strength lay not in weapons, but in their belief, a belief that they could withstand any storm, even one that threatened to erase their existence. Historians often argue about the outcome had Churchill faltered, but the message remains clear. It was this single act of leadership that shored up Britain's will. It was belief, coursing through the veins of the nation, that proved mightier than the iron fists of war. In the end, it wasn't tanks advancing, but a relentless spirit rising from the ashes of fear, rallying the people to stand united. That speech was not just a moment in time. It marked the birth of resilience, the moment when a nation chose to fight back, affirming that courage could indeed drown out the cacophony of despair. As we reflect on this powerful chapter in history, Churchill's words echo through time. Blood, toil, tears, and sweat. It was more than a speech, it was a rallying cry that ignited a flame of defiance. In that moment, the world saw the strength of resilience. Hitler, a master of intimidation, found himself facing an unwavering spirit. This reminds us that even in our darkest times, one voice can light the way, urging us all to stand firm against our own battles.